Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're starting an exciting new what-if story. What if Sasuke met a Naruto no one really knew? His entire life changed. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss future episodes. If you're excited to discover the truth about Naruto, comment below. Sasuke will discover the truth. Now sit back, relax, and watch as one unexpected meeting completely changes Sasuke's life. Let's begin. Part 1. It was dark, and Sasuke liked it. There was more than one thing he liked about darkness. The absence of light was a peaceful thing. In the darkness of his penthouse he could hear himself think. Most often that was a good thing. Gloom granted him solitude, a thing he couldn't seem to grasp while out in the sun amidst screaming crowds of fangirls. Darkness was quiet. The hum of electronics and cars seemed to fade away when his curtains were drawn. What was the thing he liked most about it? Darkness was cheap. He had no financial problems to speak of. Quite the opposite actually. Nevertheless he refused to spend more money than he had to. He found he needed it more and more to indulge in his own interests. He sat on the blue carpeted floor of his bedroom with a tragic, detached look in his eyes. Strewn before him were a needle, a few empty or half-empty bottles of beer, and a little plastic bag full of something white. He glanced down at the powdery substance with an expression akin to shame and contempt on his face. He hated heroin. He hated it, but no matter how much he hated it he could not stop the terrible itching feeling he had in his arms or the snickering voice in his head commanding him to shoot himself full of the demonic thing. The very thought of it made him want to scream and throw himself out a window, so why was he still alive? He gave it a thought. Perhaps he was afraid of dying. No, that couldn't have been it. Everyone had to go in some way or another. Maybe he should have thrown himself out of a window, but that nagging voice in his head told him to go on. He long ago decided that he would be the bitch of his inner self, so he withstood each passing day wanting whatever god to strike him dead and end his pain. There was also another thing that kept his tired heart beating. Vengeance. His blood boiled when he thought of his older brother. He destroyed the entire Uchiha bloodline, save for Sasuke and himself, in one night. People everywhere told him that his brother committed suicide after that night, but Sasuke had a nagging feeling in his chest. He felt that somewhere his brother was hiding, just waiting to strike like a viper in the grass. Hate and confusion were the only emotions Sasuke felt for him since his brother slit his neck and left him for dead. He supposed he could go on living if only to avenge the death of his family. He couldn't stand it anymore. His arms itched worse than ever and he hastily snatched up the needle and the bag of powder. He was so full of rage that his arms shook as he thought of punching a hole in his wall. He refrained from doing so. Uchihas never lost their cool. Tomorrow was the first day of high school. Oh, lovely, another reason to leap out of a window. Konoha High School if he remembered correctly. Oh well, school was just another obstacle on his path of suffering. He wondered apathetically what the day would be like. Maybe he'd meet the teacher his deceased uncle used to like. He cracked a sardonic smile as he felt the sharp prick in his wrist. I wonder what I'll wear, were his last thoughts as everything went black. The little blonde boy panicked. Well, he used to be a boy until by some mistake he was changed into a little blonde fox. He raced through the forest, glancing behind him every so often to see if his pursuer was still chasing him. The fox sensed rather than saw the shadow following him through the underbrush. No matter how fast he ran, the shadow was faster. No matter how many tricky zigzags he performed, the shadow was trickier. Come back little fox, the phantom pleaded in its sickeningly pitiful voice, be my friend. The fox would not be fooled. Who knew what pain this thing could inflict on his poor little furry hide? Then disaster struck. His paws suddenly felt like they were made of lead. As he got slower and slower the shadow got closer and closer. The forest walls were beginning to cave in on him. His feet were locked in place as he gazed in horror at the phantom's rapid approach. Thank goodness I caught you, the thing said with good humor, you were just about to run off a cliff. The fox looked over his shoulder. Not 5 feet away, a massive hole had opened up in the forest floor. Odd, it wasn't there a minute ago, was it? You're such a cute puppy, the faceless ghost crooned, you'll be my puppy forever, and ever, and ever. Naruto, Naruto. A pair of cerulean eyes popped open, unevenly cut blonde hair stood on end, short, clumsy limbs flailed and an inhumanly large, pink mouth opened wide in a surprised scream. Naruto fell out of bed with a muffled thud. Naruto. What? He screeched back at the voice that had awoken him. Get up, lazy ass. You'll be late for school. Shit, He cursed as he flew down the stairs. His feet patted against the vinyl floor of the small kitchen as he rummaged through the cabinets, the fridge, and the dishwasher looking for something to eat and something to eat it with. He poured an excessive amount of the generic brand, X, sugary cereal into a half-washed bowl and poured milk onto it until the bowl overflowed. He grabbed a filthy spoon and devoured the mountain of unwholesome sweetness with the manners of a starved baboon. Don't eat like that, you'll give yourself a stomach ache. Naruto's head snapped over to the place where the living room joined his kitchen. A tall woman with flame-red hair and blue eyes was leaning against the off-white counter that bordered the kitchen. "Oh, hey mom," he waved as cheerfully as he could at her. He tried his best to look excited and happy, but he knew she was going to pop the question he hated most. "Wait for it. Naruto, sweetie, this was it. You know what you're going to wear?" Yep, the question to end all questions. His clothes were torture, but he learned to live with them. "Not really, no," the blonde said sheepishly. "Well," a glimmer appeared in her eyes, "let's dress you up then." Now, anyone not related to Naruto's mother would have mistaken that little gleam in her eye as a normal, over-anxious need to help her child make a good first impression. Naruto, however, knew this as an eager self-invitation to make his life a living hell. In a flash she sped to the laundry room. He was past the point of no return now. Not even God could save him. She was utterly hell-bent on having her way. All retaliations against her were crushed and any attempt at escape was doomed to failure. Naruto was convicted to wear what his mom wanted him to, and it was bound to be awful. She emerged from the laundry room carrying a pile of orange, black, and navy blue clothing. She motioned him to follow her and he reluctantly complied. "Well," she said after countless combinations of countless different clothes, "look in the mirror, sweetie. You're fabulous." Naruto slowly turned to the mirror, steeling himself for the worst. He stared at his own reflection. He would be less horrified if he was staring into a stampede of charging rhinos. In the mirror he saw himself. That much was obvious. Yet, at the same time he was not himself. He'd gotten used to his treatment since the day he was born. In the mirror he saw a tight, black spaghetti-strap tank top with an orange swirl in its center. Around his neck he saw the glass dolphin necklace his mother got him when he was 2. And his pants, no, skirt was a blue, medium short, jean thing. The scary thing was that he didn't look half bad in it. In his hair he had a decorative orange flower barrette which was unraveling around the edges. He peered at what he believed to be his face with cleverly disguised horror. His eyes had a tad too much eyeliner on them, reminding him of his friends. Gaara always did have a weird sense of style. Naruto's cheeks were covered in blush and his lips shimmered with cheap lip gloss. "Like it," his mom piped up a bit too excitedly. "It's nice," Naruto lied, "but you've gone on overkill with the eyeliner and the blush." His mom mentally smacked herself. "Here, let's just fix that up a bit." Sasuke growled as he fumbled for the sleep button on the alarm clock. When he finally found it, the damn thing still wouldn't shut up. He hissed at it and knocked it off his bedside stand. The evil, nightmarish ringing still didn't stop. He just had to go buy one of those alarm clocks where the sleep button only worked once. "Oh, Sasuke, you're a smart one aren't you?" He finally rose from his bed and the alarm clock uttered one last squeal before it was permanently silenced by the World Encyclopedia set of the mighty Uchiha Sasuke. He triumphed over the clock for a minute or two, and then decided to grab something to eat. He swept up his needle and heroin off the floor, discarded the needle, and stored the bag of white powder in a secret compartment underneath his top dresser drawer. For some reason unknown to him, Sasuke's living room curtains were wide open and the sun was streaming in. He went back to his bedroom and covered his head with one of his pillows, muttering something about how the sun was too loud. He stumbled back into the sunlight, closed the curtains, then threw his pillow on the couch. Sasuke had a hangover. The empty bottles of beer on his bedroom floor were proof of that fact. The little voice in his head also seemed louder and more obnoxious than ever. It wasn't legal for Sasuke to drink. Did he know this? Yes. Did he care? No. Neither did the man on the corner of Spencer and Main as long as he didn't get caught. He seemed to love tainting youth with alcohol. Sasuke was in the middle of choosing what leftover Chinese takeout he should have for breakfast when he decided he didn't feel so good. His stomach lurched and he made a mad dash for the bathroom. When he'd flushed the contents of his now empty stomach down the drain, he took one look in the mirror and decided he needed a shower. The rest of his morning went by rather monotonously. He picked out his favorite navy shirt and khaki shorts to wear to school. He took more than one pain reliever to stop the blood pounding in his head. He took one last look in the mirror, adjusting his hair around his old headband and slipping a pair of arm warmers on his arms to hide his scars. Just when he thought he was ready to leave, he noticed that a piece of hair wasn't where it should have been. He licked his thumb and his index finger and smoothed the unruly piece of hair into its place. It only popped out again. He repeated himself only to see the damned lock of hair reappear in front of his eyes like a fly that refused to go away. He tried again and again in a vain attempt to keep the bothersome piece of hair where it belonged. "To hell with it," said the Uchiha after 10 minutes of fooling around. He grabbed his backpack, slung it angrily over his shoulder and charged out the door. Naruto walked 4 blocks from his house to his first day at Konoha High School. He whistled and skipped all the way, despite the ridiculous clothing he wore. Today was going to be a good day. His good friend Gaara was being transferred from Suna, where he was supposed to go to school, to Konoha. Apparently the majority of the parents there had filed complaints about poor, innocent Gaara harassing and beating up their kids. Gaara would never beat him up though. Gaara was his friend. He used to be Naruto's next-door neighbor once upon a time. He had a weird obsession with waxing his eyebrows. He waxed them too much. He waxed them off. Oh, well, everyone had their tastes. He walked through the glass doors of the large brick building and was amazed at how many people were already there. He took a crumpled-up piece of paper out of a pocket in his skirt. It said his homeroom for the first day would be room 213. He folded the piece of paper back up and hurried up the stairs. The bell was going to ring any second. He raced into his homeroom, tossing his book bag on the floor by a nondescript school desk and sitting down tiredly. He felt more than a little winded after running up and down the stairs, through crowds of people, slipping on a puddle of an unknown detergent-smelling liquid and bumping into some ugly-looking seniors only to discover from a silver-haired guy that all 200 rooms were on the second floor. Needless to say, he felt like an idiot. He glanced about the room to notice a group of girls sitting in a tight circle in the corner of the classroom. Naruto noticed 2 people immediately. Sakura, a strawberry-haired girl he knew from his theater camp, and Ino, a blonde prep from his old school. They were talking about something. She, this and, she, that. They seemed to be looking at his general area of the room. He looked behind him, to the right, and to the left. There were only a couple of guys sitting behind him talking about the engines they had in their cars. There was no one else. Then it dawned on him. They were talking about him. "Hey, Blondie," he heard one of them say, "come here." Naruto went obediently to the group of girls. They looked at him like they were going to eat him alive. A bead of sweat appeared on the side of his head. The one known as Sakura came up to him with a devilish grin on her face. "I remember you," she said, pointing a finger at the blonde boy. "You were at acting camp last summer, weren't you?" Naruto nodded. "And you got to play Juliet in the final play, didn't you?" He nodded again. "Instead of me." Once again, Sakura received a curt nod from the blonde boy. Sakura opened her mouth as if to say more, but she was interrupted by the opening of the homeroom door just as the bell rang. Sasuke Uyun. Chibi Naruto. Oh, my god. Falls backwards. Chibi Sasuke. Kami-sama, grabs a bottle of vodka. Chibi Sakura. Yay, I'm a whiny bitch again. Sasuke Uyun. Naruto spun around. At the door was the weirdest looking guy he'd ever seen, and weird wasn't necessarily a bad thing. His navy and white colored clothes matched perfectly with his hair. His skin was pale, sort of like a vampire. If Naruto remembered correctly, vampires were drop-dead sexy. The object of his attention glared over at the girl swooning in his corner of the room, and pointedly turned his back to them. Naruto had to pick his jaw up off the floor. This dude had a tight ass. He quickly regained his composure. Sakura and the other girls flocked like seagulls over to the desk the guy sat in. Naruto assumed he sat there because he wanted to be away from them. By the looks of things, his plan was not working. One of the girls, one with black hair pulled into cute, little ponytails, attempted to strike up a conversation with him. He huffed aloofly at her and ignored the fact that she existed. Alright, thought Naruto, that's understandable. He doesn't like being the center of attention. He must get this a lot. Another girl stepped up to him and blabbed incoherently with a giant blush covering her face. He scoffed at her and stared in an annoyed way at a random spot on the wall. Then Ino tried her luck and Naruto could tell this boy's patience was wearing thin. When another anonymous girl offered him a stick of gum, he snapped. He calmly rose out of his seat, picked up his backpack, and stared hard at the seemingly deflated girl. She shrank under his gaze like a flower in the hot sun. Before Naruto could decipher what he said, the girl had burst into tears and he saw a smirk cross the boy's lips. Scratch the whole thing, he found himself growling to himself, no matter how unbelievably hot this guy is, he's no knight in shining armor. He's an ass. All the other dudes in this class would kill to be in his shoes. And he treats this girl like dirt. Naruto marched crossly over to the desk the boy moved to. What was his name? Sasuke. Yeah, that was it. You. He pointed a finger at Sasuke. Sasuke looked up, quirking an eyebrow. Yeah, you with the duck-ass hair. Across the room the group of girls gasped and placed their hands over their mouths. Sasuke waited in silence. How could you do that to someone? She just wants to be nice and you walk all over her like she's dirt. Sasuke glared into Naruto's eyes with the ferocity of a tiger whose tail had just been stepped on. Naruto was about to lecture him further when Sakura shrieked off to his right. Do you have any idea who that is? She crowed in a shrill voice. Why should I care? Naruto challenged. That's Sasuke Uchiha, piped up another girl. Sasuke Uwata. Naruto placed his hands on his hips and glared daggers at Sasuke. He didn't understand what his last name had to do with anything. How can you be so rude to him? Another girl squeaked. Naruto glanced over and saw the girl who tried to offer Sasuke a piece of gum staring at him with a red, tear-streaked face. His eye twitched. How can you be so nice to this jerk? He pointed an accusing finger at Sasuke. He's really cool and really rich and I'll bet he'll sue you if he wants. He can't sue me. He's not even 18. He's a freshman for God's sake. He could too, she shrieked. His family owned half of the city. Then they all got murdered. Naruto glared skeptically at the girl as she continued to rant. He's all alone. His mom died, his dad died, everyone died. Do you have any idea how that must feel? Naruto got the feeling she was trying to make him regret what he said. It wasn't working. Surprising. Yes, but not working. He glanced over at the silent black-haired boy. He had a dangerous gleam in his eye as he stared a hole through the blubbering female. He grinned a bit. Maybe the uncaring boy was sensitive about his past. Countless blackmail ideas popped into his head. And he has to cook his own food, and wash his own dishes, and do his own laundry. So what? Naruto always did that by himself. These bleeding hearts made it sound like all this, alone, stuff was so bad. He was alone most of his life. You should be ashamed of yourself. Have some pity on him. She looked from Naruto to Sasuke and her expression changed from hatred to puppy love. Naruto bowed his head and was quiet for a moment. The girls and Sasuke mistook this as a sort of contemplation of his actions. A triumphant grin appeared on Sasuke's face. Pity. Naruto raised his face with a mocking smirk. Sasuke's grin faltered. How lame. Sure, it's sad, but his tragic little past shouldn't entitle him to be a spoiled rotten brat. The girls stepped back, mouths agape. Sasuke growled. You're glorifying his family's death like he's a martyr or something. He's god motherfucking rich. He's probably got an army of slaves at his disposal waiting to kiss his goddamn spoiled rotten Uchiha feet. Sasuke sat impassively at his desk. His arms were crossed tightly against his chest and he stared blankly at the wall in front of the class. His eyes twitched involuntarily and each pupil narrowed to the size of a pinhead. Naruto tilted his head and glowered down at Sasuke. You think you can control the world with your stupid little pity party? You may be able to enslave everyone else with your heartbreaking little story, but I'm not gonna be your dog. Sasuke averted his eyes to stare into the face of the screaming blonde. To his surprise, Naruto's cerulean eyes were brimming with tears. You think you know what pain is? You think you're alone? Look at them. Naruto waved a hand at the crowd of flabbergasted girls. Look at them. He repeated, they like you. They adore you. They'll even give you a piece of gum for Christ's sake. All the guys probably want to be like you and all the girls act like dirt just to get an opportunity to be stepped on by you. You've got everything everyone wants. You have gorgeous eyes, expensive clothes, and a great ass. Sasuke's eyes widened a fraction of an inch. Naruto was in hysterics now. And what do I have? I don't have perfect looks. I have no money. No one walks up to me and offers me free gum. My clothes are hand-me-downs my mom got at the thrift store. Even though I have a mom, I'm always alone, even when she's home. At night I sit outside her bedroom door and listen to her cry. You have no idea what it means to be powerless. I'm no one. I have no friends. I have no girlfriends or boyfriends. Even the cats in the alley want nothing to do with me. You should be happy you actually had a family. All I have is my mom, and the only reason she doesn't kick me out of my house is because I can make her some extra money when I'm old enough. You don't know how to be sad. You have no idea what it's like. Naruto stormed out of the class feeling sick to his stomach. Why did I have to go and make a fool of myself? Naruto sat down around the corner, trying to gather his thoughts. He suddenly felt even sicker. I could have had a great year this year and I just blew it up. Now everyone hates me. He buried his head in his knees. That Sasuke kid would kill him. No, scratch that. He'd probably hire the friendly neighborhood mafia to do it for him. Naruto felt like dirt. He felt dirtier than dirt. He wanted to melt into the floor and disappear. Maybe he could just quit school and work at a nameless fast food restaurant or a bar. Maybe the cat house where his mom worked was hiring. Yes, he would live up to his family name and become a slut like they expected him to be. He sighed into his bare knees and rocked lightly back and forth. He noticed his eyeliner bleeding down both sides of his face. Are you lost again? Naruto's train of thought was swiftly derailed as he looked up at the sound of a familiar voice. A tall, silver-haired man with a peculiar headband over his eye towered over Naruto, tapping the ground lightly with one foot. He recognized him as the man who helped him with the layout of the school earlier. Immediately embarrassed, he stood up hastily and brushed out the folds in his skirt. The silver-haired man looked impassively down at his blushing face. His visible eye stared unblinking for a short period of time. Naruto regained a minute percentage of his composure and sheepishly stared at his own feet. The hall was quiet for a long while. The tall man lowered himself to Naruto's eye level and looked him over. When he was satisfied, he stood up. You look like a train wreck. Sasuke meditated quietly in his chair. He was confused, amused and confused. He marveled at his rhyming abilities. No one, and he meant no one, ever insulted him. No one dared to rebuke the almighty Uchiha Sasuke. He was rich, he was powerful, he was scary. Everyone he'd met was either scared stiff of or hopelessly in love with him. Not this girl, not this nameless, shameless girl with her boyish haircut and obviously low budget. Once again, he marveled at his rhyming. His eyes were glued to the doorway out of which the daring girl fled. He was deeply confused. He was so bewildered that he felt, dare he say it, troubled. No one talked to him that way. Not even his mother had talked to him that way. This girl was completely oblivious to Sasuke's social status. She had no idea who he was or even who his family used to be. She must have been the only girl in a 500-mile radius who didn't know his name, his age, his height, his weight and his favorite shampoo. She was also the only girl in his history who didn't gravitate to and revolve around him. Everyone else was a drone. Why wasn't she? He wondered irritably if he had a zit on his forehead. He withdrew a mirror from a small pocket on his pack. When he attempted to look in the portable mirror, he noticed that the same dark lock of hair he had so much trouble with that morning was still dangling in front of his nose. Damn it, he cursed softly as he endeavored once again to put the untamed piece of hair in its place. As the reader would expect, it popped right back out. Damn it, it wouldn't stay. Why? He felt Sakura's eyes on him as he tried vainly to correct his hair. He scowled viciously at her and she retreated behind her wall of followers. He felt disgustingly good about what he just did. He decided once again to let the piece of hair rebel as it would, and he sank back into his chair. School started at 8 o'clock sharp, and it was 8:13. Which meant that the teacher was 13 minutes late. How many teachers were late to their own classes? He tapped his fingers anxiously against his mirror. Did his hair really look like a duck's ass? Why didn't the girl like him? Why on earth did he care? What's the matter with you? Finally found what you want is what you can't have. Sasuke glared poison over his shoulder. Neji, he warned, did you say something? The boy addressed focused his pale eyes on the fuming Uchiha and smiled, of course not, your majesty. Sasuke was just about to say something smart when the classroom door opened once again. A mask-clad face with silvery hair and only one visible eye smiled apologetically at the class. The owner of the face pushed the door open, casually saying in a perky tone of voice, sorry we're late. We got lost. Sasuke peered at the doorway as the silver-haired one moved away. The short, blonde girl trudged in the door in great contrast to the whistling, hop step of the taller man. He watched with hawk eyes as she reluctantly curled up in a chair opposite his side of the room. She glanced at him, but blushed and looked away when she found he was looking at her, too. Sasuke noticed the redness of tear streaks down her cheeks. Why was he so good at rhyming? Holy Jesus. Oh okay. The tall man stood on his tiptoes at the front of his room. The raven-haired boy snapped to attention. Now that he had the attention of the class, the man gleefully uncapped a red whiteboard marker and began to write his name on the board. Hello everyone. My name is, he finished doodling, capped the red pen and motioned dramatically to the board, Kakashi. And you will all refer to me as Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke found himself leaning forward against his desk and blinking uncontrollably at the teacher's absurd handwriting. Every single bubbly, red letter of his name was surrounded by a heart. There were doodles here and doodles there, all across the board. He felt like he had been removed from high school and put into a class of preschoolers. He glanced to his right and was happy to see Neji sharing the same reaction. Then his eyes wandered to his left where he saw the little blonde girl smiling serenely. She looked so much nicer when she smiled. Okay, now where did that come from? Do you really like Naruto that much, Sasuke Uchiha? Or are you one of those types who just stares a lot? Sasuke gritted his teeth and fixed his eyes on Kakashi. If looks could kill, Kakashi would have been dead where he stood. Luckily, the limbs of everyone's favorite teacher were still attached to the torso of everyone's favorite teacher. Kakashi-sensei, Sakura cut in. He stared at her with an enthusiastic eye. You're late. Kakashi's eye assumed an indifferent look. He stood there for several minutes, hunched over with his hands on his knees in utter silence. What's your name, sweetie? He asked sarcastically. Sakura hesitated. She looked to her beloved Sasuke for advice to find that he was enjoying this torture more than he let on. She glanced at Ino, who was giving her the, "You're on your own" look. Seeing that no one would help her out, she cleared her throat and whispered, Sakura. Speak louder, girl, I can't hear you. Sakura, she repeated. In a complete sentence. He added as a matter of factly, we are in school, you know. Sakura rolled her eyes. My name is Sakura. My name is Sakura, sensei. My name is Sakura sensei. Good. Kakashi grinned at Sakura's bleach-white face. Now then, Sakura. Why yes. Sakura, he repeated. Yes, sensei, she replied timidly. Kakashi walked around comically with his hand to his chin. He stopped in the center of the room and turned to the pink-haired girl. Sakura, quote. Shut up. Chibi-Gaara, wipes away sweat. Me. Well, that was lovely, wasn't it? Chibi Sasuke, laughing his ass off. Chibi Sakura, gasped Sasuke. Your ass, it's gone. Chibi Sakura, no, I don't have anything left to live for. Dies. Chibi Gaara, don't worry. She'll be back. Me, yeah, then maybe Kakashi can torture her more. Chibi Kakashi, Kakashi-sensei. Me, Kakashi-sensei. Chibi Kakashi-sensei. Good. Chibi Gaara, love it. Hate it. We need your feedback. It's like, beer. Me, yeah, if we don't have beer we'll have to survive on nothing but food and water. Naruto slept half the way through Kakashi's introductory speech. He explained the rules, handed out handbooks and planners, then passed out schedules. Naruto believed there was supposed to be more to it, seeing as the teacher has arrived late and finished early. He didn't press the matter though. He saw what happened to Sakura. He felt like cheering for the silver-haired man. He thought it odd for a man of clearly young age to have gray hair. Maybe he was an albino, but all the albinos he met were timid, toothpick-thin little things who looked like they'd been stuck on the dark side of the moon for 10 years. He didn't mean to be offensive, but that's just how he saw them. Kakashi wasn't a toothpick, nor did he look starved and sleep-deprived. And Kakashi-sensei was most definitely not timid. The object of Naruto's fascination was leaning back in his chair with his feet propped up on his messy desk. He was reading some orange-covered book titled Ika Ika Paradise. Maybe it was a book like Lord of the Flies or something. Poor Naru-chan never knew how wrong he was. Kakashi looked like he was having a good time. It was best not to bother him about what the book was. Beep. The intercom above Kakashi's desk choked. All right, guys and gals. Having a good first day? No. Well, time to visit your first period class. If you get lost, just ask one of the teachers in the hall. They will know what to do. Have a great time, folks. The man on the intercom hung up with a click. Have fun, everyone. Kakashi piped up and waved enthusiastically without taking his eye off of his book. Naruto shuffled through the halls and up one floor to his first class. Freshmen had already gathered in the room when he got there. Room 302. German class with Mitarashi-sensei. When class started, one of the things Mitarashi-sensei announced first was that she would answer to the name of Anko. She wanted to be called by her first name because she despised formalities. Naruto liked that. After briefly introducing the countries of Germany and Austria, she let the students get to know one another. Naruto looked around the room for a friendly face. Or a lonely one, whichever worked best. He saw a person with straw-like black hair tied into a ponytail. He was staring off into space like that weird Sasuke dude did. Maybe he liked to be alone like Sasuke did. He decided to leave him alone. Next came geometry. He poked his head into class and saw who he assumed was the teacher fuming in the corner he'd backed his desk into. He tapped his fingers together in an irritated way and his eyes surveyed the room like a hawk's. All the students in the dimly lit room were huddled in the opposite corner, looking like they were about to be devoured alive. Naruto, being the naive boy he was, casually reclined in his desk on the teacher's side of the room. He could feel the teacher's icy stare on him, but shrugged it off. He noticed how many whiteboard markers were scattered around the floor. Odd, all their tips were broken off. Some of them were even broken in half. He had a feeling that his teacher had issues. When the bell rang, Naruto was still the only one sitting at that side of the class. The creepy teacher was just about to get up out of his spot in the corner when there was a knock on the door. All was silent. You. He pointed a finger at Ino, one of the people huddled in the opposite corner. She gulped and hesitantly pointed at herself. Yes, you, the little, happy rainbow Sally in the corner. Open the door. His voice was as cold as ice. Naruto felt chills run down his spine as Ino tiptoed tentatively over to the door. She opened it timidly and in stepped another girl. She bowed quickly to the fuming teacher. I'm sorry, sensei, please forgive me, I was careless. Naruto saw the man give a slow nod. The girl meekly took a spot behind the puzzled blonde boy. The darkly dressed man walked with a purposeful slowness to the front of the room without saying a word. He snatched up a blue marker and wrote something on the board. Then the end of the pen broke off. Shortly after that he snapped the useless thing in half on his knee and stood noiselessly in front of the room. Zabuza. Naruto peered at his scratchy handwriting as he waltzed casually back and forth at the front of the room. He was talking in a monotone voice about things the students were not supposed to do in his class. Never call him by his name, never chew gum, never eat anything, never breathe without permission. Naruto was saved by the bell, and it appeared that everyone else was too. The students rushed out the door in a flood. Naruto and the nameless girl were the last to leave. They could both feel Zabuza's eyes burning two identical holes in their heads. He had earth science next. In contrast to the dark, foreboding class he'd left, Naruto's science class was brimming with interesting things. Globes and satellite replicas dangled from the ceiling, walls were covered in colorful posters, and even the desks were different colors. An old man with what remaining hair he had swept over his bald spot was at his computer. The computer was on a desk, and the desk was in front of the room. His glasses were pushed up to the bridge of his nose and he wore a candy cane striped tie. He looked like your typical, good-natured pencil pusher. When the bell rang, he pushed his glasses even farther up on his nose and walked up to the board with a coffee cup in his hand. He informed everyone that his name was Kusakabe-sensei. Naruto nearly fell asleep in the middle of his, "Ma family," speech. When he was finally done blubbering, he sorted the students into their lab groups. Uzumaki Naruto. He searched for the boy in question. Naruto acknowledged. Funny, Kusakabe was expecting a boy. He didn't ask questions. You will be paired with, he fingered down his list, Hyuga Neji. Naruto was escorted to his lab table where his lab partner sat. He set his backpack down and slumped into his seat. This whole, class introduction, thing was rather tiresome. Hello, there, said a voice next to him. He blinked and looked over at his lab partner curiously. He had long, black hair and really pale eyes. Naruto could tell the other boy wanted to make him feel comfortable. Finally, a non-jerk. Hi, Naruto piped up a little too enthusiastically. Neji grinned. He could tell the incredibly flat-chested girl was happy to meet him. She beamed at him with her charming face. Neji decided right then and there that he wanted this girl for himself. If that brat wanted to take her from him, Sasuke would have to break down his door, burn down his house, and pry her from his cold, dead arms. Naruto, oblivious to the glazed look in Neji's eyes, babbled energetically about himself. Neji nodded every once in a while to prove that he was listening. The intercom buzzed to life again. Hello all you girls and guys. Having fun so far? A little bit. If you have lunch next period, go to the gymnasium on the first floor. Once again, I'm sure your teachers will show you the way. Have a great lunch. I have lunch next. I'm starved. The excited Naruto bounced in his seat. So do I. What a coincidence, Neji smiled triumphantly. Naruto looked at him and clenched his fists against his chest. Really? He squeaked with stars in his eyes, that's so cool. You can eat with me. Pretty please. Okay. Naruto was not overreacting. He was just very excited to have a new friend. He really wanted to be with Neji. Neji was nice. Well, he had known him for only a few minutes, but he decided that Neji was nice. He hadn't laughed at him or spit in his face yet, so that made him nice, didn't it? I'd love to, Neji said in his charming, yet commanding voice. Sasuke's first class was boring. Sasuke's second class was boring. Someone got pegged by a whiteboard marker in his third class, then Sasuke's third class was boring. Now he had lunch, which sure as hell would be boring. In the gym the school had set up a miniature buffet. There were hamburgers, hot dogs, salads, apples, chips, and cookies. He took tiny bites of his lunch and glowered at everyone and everything in his line of vision. He hated school. He despised it. All morning long he was pestered by girls who wanted to date him and boys who wanted to be his friend. He remembered asking one girl what she thought of his hair and she sighed dreamily before falling over. The same piece of hair was still sitting in front of his face, mocking his helplessness to tame it. He gave up in third period when his teacher snapped his mirror in half. He glanced over at the gym door to his right and saw a flock of girls stampede through it. He knew this as his unofficial fan club and he shrank back into the droves of students. He leaned against a wall and a scraggly, blonde head of hair found its way into his view. The girl from his homeroom class was speed walking. Her face was glowing and her lips moved at 100 miles an hour. Sasuke peered harder. She was holding someone's hand. He glared. He glared harder than he'd ever glared before. He glared the glare to end all glares. People around him were awkwardly silent. They'd never seen the Uchiha so angry before. They slowly backed away from Sasuke like he was a wounded, wild animal. And he was. There, holding Naruto's hand was Hyuga Neji. His rival, his adversary in the battle of life was Neji. He always thought he was so much smarter than the furious Uchiha. He said that one day he would have everything and Sasuke would beg to serve him. And now he had the one thing Sasuke did not. A girlfriend. But he didn't think he wanted a girlfriend. Sasuke didn't understand why he was so furious. He hated the girl. He hated all girls. Didn't he? She was a nuisance, wasn't she? He wanted so much to hate the girl who had mocked him, annoyed him, and disrespected his family. Yet his blood felt hot when he saw her cute, little, delicately tanned hand held by another man's. Honestly, why didn't he just write a goddamn poem? His rhyming was beginning to make him nauseous. Rhyming aside, he knew that Naruto would never be happy with a creep like Neji. Then why did she look so happy? Neji's face was characterized by a small smile as well. They looked, dare he say it, good together. Sasuke blinked. No one had ever come to Naruto wanting to be her friend. She had no friends. Neji must have looked like a knight in shining armor come to save her from the ugly, evil dragons that were Sasuke and the rest of the population. He sighed. He felt like shit. A lowly, confused pile of shit. He focused on Neji's smug face, willing it to explode by the power of his colorful imagination. Once they had gone through the line, the disgustingly happy couple sat together against another wall. Naruto was wolfing down her food while Neji took calculated bites of his salad. Suddenly, the blonde girl looked up. Sasuke's eyes widened as he saw her leap out of her hunched position and run ecstatically away from Neji with her arms spread wide. She soared into the air like a kitten pouncing on its prey and then she came barreling back to earth. Gaara! He heard her screech as she bowled someone over. Gaara! Sasuke recognized the name. Wasn't he the one from the Suna district who beat up countless numbers of kids? One of his second cousins once lived in Suna. He got a black eye from an encounter with the red-haired wonder. Why would an innocent little girl like Naruto know someone like Gaara? The terrified victim sprang up immediately and frantically tried to pry the grinning girl off. When he finally managed to do so, Naruto only clung onto his back and ruffled up his short, red hair as he fell over. Sasuke quirked an eyebrow. This guy was shorter than Naruto. He was a shrimp. His second cousin was at least twice his size and twice his age. The shrimp must have been even shorter back then too. He pushed the girl playfully and she tackled him again in return. The kid wore so much eyeliner that he looked like a zombie. And where were his eyebrows? Sasuke leaned closer. He had no eyebrows. What a maroon. If the desired effect was to make him look creepy, he had achieved his goal with flying colors. Naruto dragged the red-haired boy over to where Neji still sat. Sasuke could tell that introductions were being passed between them. Gaara would say some one-word sentence, then Neji would make a hand motion and do the same. All the while the hyper-blonde girl was babbling on, and on, and on, about something that was probably completely off the subject. He didn't understand Naruto. Her friends were nothing like her. Hey, apparently she did have friends after all. He watched as Naruto's expression went from ecstatic, to scared, to dreamy, and then to sadness. Her eyes shimmered and she began making exaggerated motions with her hands. Sasuke knew she was talking about him. He saw Neji's eyes widen a fraction and wondered why. He took a brief look at the other participants in the conversation. Naruto was still acting pathetic. And Gaara. Whoa. Gaara's face screamed murder. Sasuke saw his fists clench and his face contort into an expression of cleverly concealed, savage rage. Sasuke rolled his eyes exasperatedly. He'd best make out his will then. The red-haired boy's eyes were twitching ever so slightly now. A vein popped out of his forehead. Sasuke smiled his sardonic smile. This guy was going to kill him. He wondered distantly if it would hurt. It wouldn't do him any good to stab Sasuke in the heart though. He didn't have one, but on second thought, maybe he did. He watched as the girl's expression changed. She was smiling again. If Sasuke had no heart, then it would only be logical for him not to feel some degree of happiness when Naruto smiled. Sasuke bemusedly turned away and tossed the remainder of his lunch in the trash. He glanced back at Naruto. Maybe he did have a heart after all. Naruto watched as the back of who he thought was the Uchiha boy vanished through the gym doors. He cringed. Was Sasuke watching him the entire time? Maybe he should have crawled under a rock and died while he still had a chance. What is it, Naruto? Gaara was glancing up at him with a curious look on his face. Oh, nothing. I just thought I saw Sasuke. That. Gaara hissed and rolled up his sleeve like he wanted to fight. Where is he? I'll bury him. Naruto waved his arms in a no big deal sort of way. It's okay, Gaara. It was sort of my fault anyway. Sort of your fault. That asshole is going around and walking all over people. How is that your fault? Naruto scratched his head. I mean the argument thing. That was my fault. I feel sorta bad now. Neji spoke up. Don't feel sorry. He had it coming. He's been spoiled ever since he was born. He slung an arm over Naruto's shoulder. Don't get so hung up about it. Naruto was really starting to like Neji. Neji made his whole day better. He was much better than that Sasuke bastard. Much, much better. And he didn't have duck-ass hair. Yeah, the intercom blared again. Will students at lunch please leave for their 4th period class? Neji stretched. Well, he said, what do you have next, then? Art, Naruto replied. He hoped Neji would have the same. What Neji said next broke his heart. I've got English. My friend says the teacher is a real pushover. See you. Naruto waved back, hollering something about missing him already, then turned to Gaara. What do you have next, Gaara? The green-eyed boy pulled a piece of paper out of his jeans pocket. Says here, he droned, I've got the same class as you. 208. Naruto nodded enthusiastically. Well, isn't that just peachy? I hope we'll get to sit together then. The pair walked up the hall together. Naruto gazed lovingly at his best friend. In the beginning, Gaara hated him. Whenever he walked up to him in elementary school, the red-haired boy would just push him away and laugh at him. But our naive little Naruto kept coming back with his friendly intentions, and one day Gaara gave up. He asked Naruto why he wanted to be his friend if he kept refusing. Naruto said that Gaara was lonely, just like him. And Gaara was lonely. He never felt the want or need for human companionship when he was young. People were bad. He knew that better than anyone. He wanted nothing more than to see them cry, bleed, and die. He wanted to kill every last one of them. When he got to know Naruto, he found that Naruto was different. He didn't want to scratch him, or bite him, or kick dirt in his face. Naruto was pure, and Gaara liked it. Gaara was also the only person outside his family who knew he was a boy. Naruto's mother had always wanted a girl. Before she went into the business of selling herself, she had a boyfriend. It was hard to believe, but at one time Naruto's mother had actually been in a real relationship. She ran away with his father when they were only 17. They lived together in the same house their son lived in now. After a while his mom found out she was pregnant. She told Naruto's father the good news. His father had decided that no matter what gender he was, they would name him Naruto. And so he was named Naruto. When he was born, his mother figured out that he was a boy. She was disappointed, the doctors were drunk, and for some reason unknown to him, his birth certificate said he was a girl. Naruto had always been told that his dad died. When he asked his mom how he died, she'd look away and he'd feel like he'd just thrown some kind of rock at her. He'd go to his room, feeling awful. The next morning he would apologize and she always waved it off. Since he was legally her daughter, she bought him all sorts of girl stuff. He only had 3 pairs of jeans, and they were girl jeans. All of his shirts had things like hearts, funky, feminine swirly things, fringe, and immature, innocent sayings on them. It wasn't as bad as it could have been. When he was little he used to look like a walking doily. No one seemed to question the fact that he was a girl. He sort of looked like one. He had girly hips, a girly attitude, and he was not ashamed of the fact that he liked guys. His voice hadn't deepened yet, and he wondered if it ever would. Maybe all the estrogen in his life was making him morph into his mother's perfect daughter after all. He did have one uncle though. And this uncle was the perverted, sick individual who taught sweet little Naruto what it meant to be a guy. Good old Jiraiya, the self-acclaimed, super pervert. When Naruto's mom was busy, he'd always get sent to his favorite uncle's house. Jiraiya would wait until his sister's nondescript, red compact car drove out of sight before he dragged Naruto to his office. In this office of his uncle's there was a desk, a computer, some papers, a printer, and a filing cabinet. In this filing cabinet were a few rather interesting objects. There were magazines of various titles, each sporting a naked woman on the cover, a pack of colorful plastic things Naruto didn't care to know about, and a few other things better left unsaid. Naruto would be free to dig through his uncle's porn magazines as well as fool around on his computer. Needless to say, his uncle had some tasty things in his favorites list. Jiraiya acted like a salesman. He'd pull out a random magazine and animatedly explain what was so exciting about it, then he'd shove it up against Naruto's face and continue to babble about his inner thoughts. His uncle was so perverted that Naruto had taken to calling him Ero Sanin. He quickly adopted the nickname. Come to think of it, he was going to his uncle's house after school. Maybe he'd bring Gaara with him. The pair of them strolled into their art class. It was a cluttered, yet colorful little room. He dragged Gaara over to a table near the front of the room and allowed his backpack to hit the ground with a thud. The blonde took a look around the room. The lonely guy from first period sat by himself at the table next to Naruto's. He stared impassively at the back wall without blinking. Naruto gawked at the stoic boy. He really was like Sasuke. Why didn't he have any friends? Naruto, in an attempt to be friendly, walked over to the boy and tried to strike up a conversation. He was promptly ignored and he heard the black-haired one mutter something about him being troublesome. Crestfallen, he wandered back over to his seat. Why don't you think he'll talk to me, Gaara? He asked his red-haired friend. Gaara shut his eyes and bowed his head, maybe he doesn't want any friends. A few seconds before the bell rang, someone else meandered into the classroom. Naruto looked up to see a navy-clad, pale figure lounged in a chair next to the stoic, straw-haired boy. Sasuke. Naruto blinked. Sasuke had his art class. He stole a glance at Gaara. Oh boy. Well, as long as their fights didn't mess him up when he was drawing he was okay. He just had to wait for Gaara to notice him. 3, 2, 1, Uchiha. Gaara stood up and viciously glowered at Sasuke. Uchiha Sasuke. He raised his voice to a point where it was just dangerous enough to make any normal human being cower in the shadows. When Sasuke looked up uncaringly, Gaara sneered. Ha, I knew it. You Uchihas are all the same. You act tough, but you're just a bunch of yellow cowards. You make me sick. Sasuke shrugged it off. He opened his eyes slowly, huffed to himself, and smirked. Upon doing so, he pointedly turned his back on Gaara and relaxed in his chair as he had done before he was verbally assaulted. The rest of the class was uneventful, save for the murderous glances that passed between Gaara and the Uchiha. The art teacher's name was Peri-sensei. She had dirty blonde hair and she wrote her name on the board like any normal teacher would. Naruto could tell she was trying to act with some degree of normality, in any way, normality, related to anything in Konoha. The bell sounded and the class ended. Tentatively, Naruto tried to make his departure from class as uneventful as humanly possible. Sadly, fate had other ideas. Gaara glowered up at Sasuke, "Fool with Naruto and you'll pay, Uchiha." Sasuke looked down on Gaara with an irritated expression. "So," he began, "if you're so righteous, tell me, why don't you come over and fight me?" Gaara took a step back. "Maybe you don't need to fight to prove your worth. Maybe you don't need to fight because you gave up fighting long ago. Maybe you don't need to fight because you couldn't stand to let your little blonde friend see you lose." He paused. "Maybe you don't need to fight because you have no one to protect." Then Sasuke gave the redhead an all-knowing look, "Or maybe it's because fighting would make you a coward." Gaara's eyes widened, "Just like me." He left a profound silence with Naruto and his friend. They glanced at one another, then at Sasuke's fleeting form. They took the long way to their next class. They didn't talk. Naruto glanced over worriedly at his friend, who had a glazed sheen in his eyes. His face was expressionless and the slow pace in which he walked suggested that he was thinking. Naruto shoved his hands in his pockets. He felt uncomfortable in awkward silences. The clouds over Naruto's mind cleared instantly when Neji's long hair came into view. He glommed the unprepared victim and Neji teetered off balance for a moment. Gaara walked casually up to the tittering Naruto and his partner. They were both walking hand in hand into their health class, leaving Gaara to contemplate his thoughts. "Fighting would make you a coward. Just like me." Itachi. "Yes, Sasuke. What's a coward?" Sasuke's older brother turned and gave him a solemn look. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know." The little Sasuke's feet shuffled in his sandals, "Just curious I guess." Itachi motioned for his little brother to take a spot beside him in the sand. Sasuke did so quietly and obediently. For a while the two of them sat on the beach outside of town and just let the wind ruffle their hair. The ocean glittered in shades of orange and magenta as the sun vanished beneath the horizon. Itachi stole a glance at his younger brother and spoke up. "Some people think a coward is a man who hides in the shadows when he's in trouble. When he or someone he knows is in danger, he turns tail and runs." Sasuke leaned closer to his brother as a strong gust of wind buffeted them both. "Some people think if you give up a fight, you're a coward, even if you have no chance of winning." Sasuke huddled his legs up against his chest and rocked back and forth detachedly. He listened as his brother's melodious voice continued, "But people think that if you die fighting in a losing battle, you're a hero. If you died knowing you would never win, that made you brave and courageous. Some people also think that those who fight without a second thought are courageous." He paused and looked down at his puzzled younger brother, "But I define courage as cowardice." Sasuke's big, dark eyes blinked once. "Fighting makes someone a coward. Someone who fights may have righteous reasoning for doing so, but in the end they are only selfishly trying to prove their worth to the world or to themselves. People who fight losing battles are only trying to martyr themselves for their own miserly benefit. They're nothing but fools. People who fight because they know they'll win anyway are cowards. They beat down on those weaker than them simply to prove to themselves the extent of their own strength. Cowards, by definition, are people of fear, Sasuke. Bullies are afraid to be unknown in life, and martyrs are afraid that their lives would never amount to anything otherwise. When you think about it, cowards are after only one thing, pride. And in the end, Sasuke, pride is what really makes a true coward." Sasuke stalked soundlessly through the halls. The bell would ring at any minute, but he didn't care. His confrontation with Gaara dug up a few memories better left buried. His brother was long gone with the rest of his family, but his ghost lingered in the murkiest depths of Sasuke's consciousness, taunting and whispering lullabies, the lyrics of which he had long ago forgotten. He wished that for one second he could be alone, but memories slowly rose from the graveyard of his dreams and floated around his mind like specters. The bell rang and the last of the students scrambled to their classrooms, but not he. Sasuke continued to wander aimlessly through the halls. He had already passed by the class he was supposed to be in several times without incident. He noticed with distaste that virtually everyone he hated was in his health class. He saw Neji toying with a pencil, Sakura tapping her fingers together, Gaara with his feet on his desk, and Ino chewing on one of her fingernails. He also saw in the midst of Gaara and Neji, a pleasantly smiling face with eyes like the sea and a head of hair like the rising sun. If Sasuke wasn't such an ass, then maybe that would have been he sitting next to Naruto, and not Neji. Never in Sasuke's life had he felt so alone. He slumped against the wall and let his shoes slip until he hit the floor. The day was oozing by like a puddle of outdated, nondescript molasses on a January morning in the Arctic Circle. Itachi. Sasuke wanted to die. What's a coward? According to his brother, everyone was a coward. Some people think a coward is a man who hides in the shadows when he's in trouble. Sasuke was always hiding in the shadows. People who fight losing battles are only trying to martyr themselves for their own miserly benefit. You're making a martyr out of yourself, Sasuke. People who fight because they know they'll win anyway are cowards. He always had his financial situation in mind when someone challenged his authority. And in the end, Sasuke, pride is what really makes a true coward. Maybe he was too proud to make friends, or to even get help with his problems. He always thought that things would go so much better when he was alone, and now he was a wreck. His heroine was stuck at home in the darkness of his dresser drawer, and Naruto was flirting with Neji. He cradled his head in his hands. Itachi, Itachi. I think I can understand why you didn't think I was worth killing. What's a coward? I'm a coward, Itachi. I'm a coward. Back in health class, students were fooling around as they would. Naruto was surprised that his homeroom teacher was also his health teacher. Kakashi-sensei was by far the most interesting teacher yet. He didn't bother too much with introductions because most students had already met him. Instead he was absorbed in his book. Naruto was delighted to see so many people he knew in his class. This would be a great class, he could tell. When he was done chattering Neji's head off, he began to notice some rather odd behavior on behalf of Kakashi-sensei. He would set his book down, glance at the clock, get up, peer out the door, mutter something Naruto couldn't hear, then sit down again and read his book. Naruto wanted to ask him what was wrong. He shuffled over to Kakashi-sensei and hovered around his desk for a while. The silver-haired teacher glanced up at the hesitant blonde and quirked an eyebrow. What's with you? Actually, I was going to ask you the same thing. Naruto crossed his arms. Why are you acting so weird? Kakashi, clearly impressed by his student's straightforward attitude, crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair. You're very observant, aren't you? Naruto waited for an answer. Taking the hint, Kakashi tilted his head. You haven't seen Uchiha Sasuke anywhere, have you? Startled, Naruto stuttered. And no, I don't think I have. He lied. Is he in this class? Kakashi threw his arms up in the air. Well, he's supposed to be. Says here, he pointed at a roster on his desk, that he's supposed to be in this class now. We both know he was here this morning, so where is he now? Naruto looked at his feet. You saw him recently, didn't you? The silver-haired sensei tapped his fingers on the table in a knowing way. Yeah, Naruto sighed, we saw him. We, Gaara and I, they got in a fight, sort of, and now Gaara's really quiet. What was it about? I dunno, something about cowards I guess. Kakashi stayed silent for a while. Sensei. Naruto looked up with his hands on his hips. Why are you so concerned about him? Kakashi sighed. I used to be a good friend with his uncle. Obito, that was his name, was always telling me what a troubled kid Sasuke was. He said he suspected his nephew's older brother was filling his head with the facts of life. His ideals were a bit extreme, let's just say. Oh, Naruto averted his eyes. I see. What do you say I go look for him? I think I'll know where to find him. I think, Naruto cracked a smile, I might like that. Found you. Sasuke looked up from his hunched position on the ground to see Kakashi-sensei staring him in the face. When Sasuke didn't say anything, Kakashi piped up exuberantly, you know, you look a lot like Naruto did this morning, although I don't think Uchihas cry. Sasuke scowled. Kakashi knew he wasn't listening, but he couldn't care less if he was talking to a brick. You surprise me. I thought all you Uchihas were perfect. He shrugged. Guess I was wrong, though. Sasuke's face darkened and the silver-haired man could tell he hit a soft spot. His eyes softened. He straightened from his crouch on the floor and looked at Sasuke expressionlessly. You know, he began, you shouldn't listen to Itachi. Even the dead one is a fool. Sasuke watched, dumbfounded, as his homeroom teacher whistled his way down the empty corridor, leaving him, once again, alone with his thoughts. When the silver-haired teacher waltzed back through the doorway, Naruto was disappointed to see that he was alone. He marched up to his teacher for an explanation. Where's Sasuke? Asked Naruto. Oh him, he's lying in a pool of blood somewhere on the first floor. Here, Wana read his suicide note. It's a little bloody but. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto whined. Relax, relax. He's coming. Kakashi waved Naruto off with one hand while the other picked up his orange book. How do you know? Naruto pouted. Shoo, go away. Kakashi shoved him away from his desk and stuck his nose in his book. Defeated, Naruto returned to his desk. What was that about? Neji inquired with an eyebrow quirked. Naruto beamed at him. Oh, nothing. The health teacher is definitely friendlier with you, Gaara spoke up. Gaara, you're feeling better, then? Naruto perked. Gaara sighed, I guess so. That's good. You're even creepier when you're quiet, the blonde chuckled nervously. At this, Gaara had no choice but to smile. It was at this moment in time when Sasuke chose to join the class. The group of girls at the back became profoundly quiet. All their movements stopped. Their sudden lack of action inspired Kakashi to look briefly up from his book. Naruto saw Sasuke and Kakashi exchange greetings before the teacher gestured in the direction of his assigned seat. He slowly removed his backpack and let it hit the floor carelessly. He all but fell into his chair before he assumed his usual look of indifference. Naruto found himself staring. Sasuke looked old. His eyes were glazed over and his eyelids drooped ever so slightly. He even had a stray piece of hair sticking out in front of his nose. He still managed to look intimidating, though. He held an impossibly thick air of authority, even when he looked like he was about to drop dead from exhaustion. Gaara nodded briefly and respectfully to him, and to Naruto's surprise, he nodded back. Oh look, there's a flock of seagulls across the street wearing tutus and dancing the lambada. Surprisingly, it was Neji who broke the silence. Half of the class, including Naruto, spontaneously burst into laughter. The mood brightened instantly, and Sasuke looked like he was actually considering thanking Neji. The bell rang again and Naruto was on the home stretch. The last class of the day was right around the corner. He bid Neji and Gaara goodbye and sped off to English class. He was in smart English and was infinitely proud of himself for it. It was the one thing he was better than everyone else at. Well, besides cross-dressing, but that didn't count. He was only mildly surprised to see the quiet, straw-haired boy again. He popped up everywhere. He was a gopher. Maybe he'd call him Gopher Boy. He took a seat near him, only to receive the aptly named, "You again." Stare. He felt awkward when he had no one to talk to, so he doodled on a scrap piece of paper. Naruto found himself mildly surprised again when Sasuke marched into class looking better than he had in health class. He saw Sasuke also give him the, "You again" stare. Sasuke, he heard the greeting of the stoic boy a few desks away from him. Shikamaru, Sasuke bowed slightly to the boy and stole a spot to his left. Naruto blinked. Freaks just made friends with other freaks, didn't they? Neji must have had the same English teacher, for he described his teacher as a wimp. Iruka-sensei was just that. Naruto knew his heart was made of silly putty. His eyes sparkled and he glided across the room like the Queen of England on roller skates. He was always tapping his fingers and sending wary glances about the room when he was at his desk. He was enthusiastic, yet he sometimes acted like a sparrow under the gaze of the neighborhood housecat. Naruto didn't see this as a bad thing. He liked the careful Iruka-sensei better than any of his other teachers, even Kakashi. Iruka was one of his teachers in theater camp. The brown-haired wonder always cooked him free ramen after practice. Naruto thought of him as the father he never had. Iruka acted like his counselor, but not in the cheesy phony shrink sort of way. He could talk to his teacher as if he'd known him his whole life. Naruto loved it when Iruka tripped down the stairs. But he kept that to himself. He had a feeling that he'd look forward to the end of the day even more now. Sasuke and Shikamaru were not impressed. Naruto thought as much. Who cared what they thought? He liked Iruka. That was that. When school finally ended, Naruto was waiting near the front doors for Gaara. He sat on a bench that was donated by an anonymous person and doodled in his notebook. He drew a fox. He wasn't quite sure why, but he drew it all the same. He tore the perforated paper, placed the picture over the cover of his book, withdrew a black permanent marker from his backpack and colored it in. He didn't want the marker to bleed through his paper. He discontinued his drawing when he glimpsed Gaara trotting swiftly over to his spot on the bench. So, Gaara peered over his shoulder, "You want to walk home?" Naruto stuffed his drawing supplies back in his backpack. "Actually, I wanted you to come to my uncle's house with me," he gave his friend the infamous Naruto puppy stare. Gaara rolled his eyes. "Sure, but I'll have to call Yoshimaru first." Gaara flipped open his cellular phone and dialed his guardian's number. "Yeah, Yoshimaru. This is Gaara. Can I go with Naruto somewhere? No. The one with the porn mags in his office? No, definitely not. We're going somewhere else. Yes, I'm telling the truth. Why would I lie? Yes, I can get home by myself. Thanks. Bye. Gaara hung up and Naruto shook his head. You're such a dirty liar. I know. Chibi Gaara. Wow, that was long. Chibi Naruto. I have such a weird family. Chibi Sasuke. And, in case no one's noticed, this school is a Western school. Our lovely author lives in America, so she's going on what she knows. Me. Thank you, Sasuke. Chibi Sasuke. Rolls eyes. Me. Picks up the little Chibi Sasuke and squeezes him. Chibi Sasuke. Choking. Not breathing. Choking. Not breathing. Chibi Naruto. Put him down. Grabs onto Sasuke's left foot and pulls. Chibi Sakura. No, my Sasuke. Grabs his other foot and tugs. Chibi Sasuke. Garbled gibberish. Sasuke was alone, that much he understood. But something wasn't right. Something was terribly out of place. Sasuke wasn't sure what it was, and that scared him. He was in his room. The navy-colored curtains were drawn, his bed was neatly made, and all his lights were out. There was one light, however. It was a dim, yellowish light which bled out from beneath his door. This struck Sasuke as strange, so he crept closer. The nearer the door he got, the more it became apparent that there was a most unusual sound emanating from behind the door. Curiosity took hold of him and he twisted the doorknob. The door creaked open and a black-haired head peeked out. The hallway was empty. The light he had seen under his door was the glow of the living room light bouncing off the walls of the normally dim corridor. He put a hand to his ear. The unearthly wailing sound was more prominent now. Maybe some of his relatives were still here. His family reunions were always long, and everyone always came. He went to bed when his brother told him it was getting late. Come to think of it, maybe his brother was awake. He had a violin, and that's what the strange sound seemed like. He pushed open Itachi's door, expecting to see his brother on his bed, playing his violin. The room was cold and empty, much to his surprise. Maybe his brother was in the living room. Sasuke padded over to the archway which led to the aforementioned room. He was disappointed again to find it empty, save for a few nondescript lumps on the carpet. Odd, those weren't there before he went to bed, were they? He tiptoed closer, then felt something break under his bare feet. He stepped back to see what it was. On the floor in front of him was a puddle of spilt wine in the wine glass he stepped on. He bent down and fingered the pieces. Someone must have just been careless and left it there. Probably Obito. He always was messy. Sasuke walked over to one of the lumps of fabric and poked it with his big toe. It was soft, and it rolled when he kicked it. He kicked it some more until it flipped over. Sasuke gasped and jumped back. Then he took a second glance and knelt on the floor. His aunt was sleeping on the floor. The raven-haired boy's eyes sparkled. Maybe she got drunk and his dad didn't want to pick her up off the carpet. He decided to wake her up. Auntie, Auntie, wake up. He shook her playfully and waited for her to get up and yell at him. He was puzzled when she didn't. Hello, he poked her again. Auntie, you shouldn't drink so much. Wake up. He became worried when she still didn't budge. He shook her violently, then waited. When she didn't move, tears started running down his face. Auntie, he whispered in her ear, are you dead? When she didn't answer him, he cautiously lifted up her right eyelid. Her eyes were like glass. Sasuke backed away slowly at first, then tripped over another one of the lumps of fabric. He staggered away when he saw the blade of his mom's bread knife buried to the hilt in the shirt of one of his cousins. He ran through the house, shouting his mother's name. Every room he searched in was littered with puddles of wine, something red and sticky, and more heaps of dead relatives. In the kitchen, he saw one of his relatives with which he was most familiar. Lying on the cold, off-white tile floor was his uncle Obito. And his head was missing. Mama, Mama, where are you? As he neared the double doors to his balcony his cries became more high-pitched. The blood on the floor was becoming thicker and he was being suffocated by the smell. He raced through the double doors with his heart racing. He called to his mother frantically. He was running around the corner when his heart stopped. On the cold floor lay the broken, bloody, mangled bodies of his mother and father. He screeched both their names as he knelt by them, crying a river of tears. He buried his face in his mother's shirt, sobbing and hiccuping as he cuddled into her. The sound of the violin filled his ears, drowning out his cries of anguish. The noise sprang up from everywhere, it seemed. Why are you crying, Sasuke? A melodious voice cooed. Alarmed, Sasuke looked up with eyes as wide as saucers. In the doorway stood the silhouette of his older brother. The boy watched in horror as Itachi hid a shimmering kitchen knife beneath his sleeve. Itachi stepped forward and Sasuke scrambled back. What's wrong, Sasuke? The boy heard him say, I thought we were buddies. The wind blew Itachi's long hair in wisps across his face. Sasuke could see through his older brother's mess of hair. Sasuke knew he was smiling. He kept creeping forward until he had Sasuke huddled fretfully in a corner. The boy shook with cold and fear as his brother grinned like a madman. Stop it, he cried, Itachi, it's not funny. It's not funny. Tears fell down his face like twin waterfalls. When Itachi persisted, he tucked his head into his chest and covered it with his arms. He screamed when he felt Itachi's cold, bloody hands wrap around his slender neck. His screams turned into choked sobs as his brother slowly squeezed his throat. The boy's hands flew to Itachi's as he tried vainly to pry them off. He struggled and flailed like a fish caught in a net. He felt Itachi lifting him off the ground and soon his legs were kicking blindly at his assailant. He tore at Itachi's skin with his nails when he felt himself being hoisted over the railing of the balcony. When he felt nothing but the sensation of crisp wind racing around his ears and his brother's hands choking his neck, Sasuke went instantly limp. Itachi had him by the throat 12 floors above a busy street. Sasuke didn't even dare to scream for fear that his brother might drop him. His body shook lightly with sobs as he held a death grip on his brother's arms. Itachi was whispering something to him in a soft voice, but Sasuke was too terrified to hear. That and he was in danger of blacking out from asphyxiation. For a long time Sasuke was left with nothing but the wind biting at his toes and the suffocating grip on his neck. Suddenly, his brother's hold on his neck loosened. He panicked, screaming and squeezing his brother's arms so tightly, that if he were older, he would have broken Itachi's wrists. He felt himself being pulled back over the railing before being dropped on the cold tile. He choked and gasped for air, clutching his bruised neck and curling into a fetal ball. Before his oxygen-deprived brain could register what was going on, Itachi had taken him up in his arms and was murmuring softly in his ear. Sasuke groped for his brother and held fast to the lapels of his jacket. He sobbed and coughed in his brother's embrace. Itachi stroked his hair soothingly as his younger sibling clung to him for dear life. Sasuke was cold, scared, and lightheaded. He didn't care that the person he held onto was the same that had tried to drop him off a balcony moments before. I don't wanna die. I don't wanna die. He wailed and cried into Itachi's warm chest. He was far too terrified to be confused. He only knew that there was something warm and sweet-smelling for him to hold onto. Shish, Itachi soothed, I'd never kill you, Sasuke. You know that, don't you? Sasuke wasn't sure of anything anymore. He cuddled further into Itachi's jacket. He was just beginning to feel secure when he felt the bite of cold, sharp metal against his bruised neck. Puzzled, he gazed back up at his brother. I'd never kill you, Sasuke. Sasuke's eyes widened. You're not worth killing. A scream was heard, followed by a thump, which was then followed by a muttered curse in the penthouse of Uchiha Sasuke. The furious raven-haired boy padded to Anne from his kitchen with a bag of ice on his head. He was on the nod again. Damn heroin. This was the second time he'd woken up, and it was only 1 o'clock. He didn't overdose, like he did last night, so he woke up frequently. Last night he woke up once, and he had enough brains to get up into his bed. Tonight, however, he woke up on the floor the first time and curled up against the couch. He awoke so violently the second time that he bumped his head on the damn thing. Sasuke was hunched over tiredly on the offending plush leather couch. He held the homemade ice pack on his head and rubbed his temples. He wondered irritably how large a bump was left on his head. His hair was scraggly and he felt like death. He wasn't going to fall asleep anytime soon. Therefore, Sasuke opted to make himself some breakfast. He staggered over to his kitchen and searched his freezer for a box of cheap noodles. He popped the week-old takeout in the microwave and flung himself on the couch again. There, he stared off into space with glazed, dark eyes. Why did everything happen to him? And that Naruto thought she had problems. He wrinkled his nose. Blood. The whole room reeked of it. He was well aware that he couldn't get rid of the smell with 1,000 gallons of carpet cleaner. The smell was in his head. According to his counselor, everything was in his head. He removed himself from the couch and walked in the direction of his balcony. He unlocked the double doors and flung them both open. The tiles were cold against his feet, as they always were, but he was used to it. He could barely hear the hum of the microwave anymore. His kitchen seemed so far away. Sasuke casually leaned against the newly painted rim of his balcony. Small gusts of wind toyed with his hair as he gazed distantly at the road below. Spencer Street was lively as always. Cars came and left in a blink and the neon lights in the windows of cafes flickered dimly. The dark-eyed boy was lost in his thoughts. The distance from his balcony to the street seemed so much smaller. He averted his eyes to the place he once knelt, crying over his mother and father. The tiles were different. They were blue, like his curtains. Everything in his house was different. Orochimaru, his self-claimed guardian, had seen to it that every trace of Itachi's existence had been erased. Orochimaru was one of Sasuke's father's business partners. It was well known that he sapped money from the Uchiha family as well as from the rest of the city. In Sasuke's opinion, he was slime. He wanted nothing to do with him. Orochimaru insisted, however, that Sasuke needed protection from the outside world. Sasuke knew he was just after his money. Orochimaru was a vampire. A creepy, money-sucking vampire. Or maybe he was a leech. Yes, that sounded worse. Orochimaru was one big-ass, money-sucking leech, and Sasuke hated him for it. A high-pitched beeping roused Sasuke from his musings. His breakfast was ready. He rolled his eyes and heaved himself off of the railing. He slurped up the cheap rice noodles greedily. In less than 5 minutes, the noodles had disappeared. Sasuke had a magical way of making things disappear when he was hungry. The blood smell was gone, so Sasuke sat in his living room, staring at an interesting blotch of nothing on the wall. Sasuke ran his fingers over the left side of his neck. He felt something puffy winding its way down to his collarbone. For a second he could feel the bite of the kitchen knife on his skin, but in a flash the moment was gone. He was still staring at the same blotch of nothing when his phone rang. He knew it was Orochimaru, so he opted to leave it unanswered. "You've reached the house of Uchiha Sasuke," his answering machine droned. "Either I don't know you, I hate you, I'm gone, I'm dead, or I'm just too damn lazy to answer the phone. I'd prefer that you don't leave me a message, but if you have to, leave it after the fucking beep." The machine beeped. "Sasuke, pick up the phone." "Yes, Orochimaru." How could he have guessed? "Sasuke, you can't fool me. I saw you standing outside a moment ago. Pick up the goddamn phone." Sasuke cringed. The leech was everywhere. "I can see you right now. Answer the phone." Sure enough, Orochimaru was tapping his foot against the fire escape of the apartment building beside his with a smug smirk on his face. Sasuke glared at the man. He was really starting to get on his nerves. Sasuke stomped over to the panoramic windows of his living room and glowered down at his guardian. He took a handful of curtain in one hand, and in the other was the cord to his phone. "Sasuke, Sasu, no, don't you dare. I have the keys to your room. I can come up there. Boy, are you listening?" No, indeed Sasuke was not listening. He yanked the curtains closed and tugged the plug of his phone out of the outlet. He then strolled over to his door and bolted it from the inside. Sasuke then wandered back over to his couch and flopped onto its leather cushions. He was feeling tired again, but he wasn't about to fall asleep with Orochimaru slinking about. The man gave him the creeps. Sasuke grinned. Orochimaru would have to break down his door to get in. He felt powerful. 8 minutes later, he heard quiet footsteps outside his door. He heard someone sorting through his keys and Sasuke immediately knew it was his guardian. The clinking of a key in a lock reached his ears, then his door surged open only to bounce right back and shut in Orochimaru's face. Sasuke laughed into his arm. He was God. The man attempted to force the door open, but it was held fast by the chain Sasuke had locked it with. He heard the man curse and a pale hand snaked its way through the slit between the partially opened door and the wall. Sasuke watched as the hand fumbled with the chain, trying to break it loose. On a whim, Sasuke waltzed over to the door and kicked it hard. The hand in the door curled up like a dead spider and withdrew. "Sasuke, open the door, now." Sasuke peered through the slit at the fuming Orochimaru. "Can I help you?" he asked in a mockingly businesslike manner. "I demand that you let me in, Sasuke," he said in an equally cold tone. "Look, whatever it is you're selling, I don't want any." He closed his door again. He could tell that the guardian was furious. He heard him pacing outside the door. Sasuke sat back and enjoyed his pain. "Look, Sasuke, can we talk?" Sasuke rolled his eyes. He was using his psychiatrist voice. Sasuke hated the psychiatrist voice. The civilians one floor down say they've been hearing some strange things coming from your room. Sasuke didn't care. They say they hear thumps and crashes and screams. Are you doing something up here I should know about? No, go away. Sasuke, are you on smack? No, now leave. That's just not doing it for me, boy. Tell me what's going on. I'm not listening. You're older than that, boy. Silence. Sasuke, not a word. Orochimaru cursed, hissed, and stomped off. Sasuke was deeply satisfied. Now he could resume his life of quiet desperation. Naruto kicked the rack underneath the desk in front of him in geometry. He was bored, and the dreariness of his classroom wasn't helping. Zabuza sat in his corner, conniving some sort of evil scheme, Naruto was sure. The evil teacher had assigned more homework than Naruto cared to do. He got half of his first paper done in class, but he didn't feel like working any longer. Normally, on the second day of high school, one had little work or none at all. Enko didn't give him any homework, and he assumed no one else would either. This was ridiculous. The girl who came late yesterday was relentlessly scribbling answers out on a paper. Naruto learned that morning that her name was Haku, or his name, as he had recently been informed when he asked why he didn't hang out with other girls. Naruto felt embarrassed in a way, but also warm and fuzzy in another. There was another cross-dresser for him to talk to. Joy. Haku was so intent on his work that Naruto began to feel sorry for the pencil and paper. With the friction he was creating between the two things, he half expected to see one or the other catch fire. Then the school would burn down and he would escape the Konoha funny farm. But then the fire could spread across the city and Gaara's house would burn down. Gaara would be pissed, and would probably blame it on Sasuke. Sasuke would get mad, then the mafia would kill Gaara. After that, his ghost would haunt Naruto until he died. Naruto didn't want Gaara to die, nor did he want to be haunted by his ghost. He willed the paper not to catch fire. The bell rang and everyone rushed to the door. Naruto hung back with Haku. Haku seemed like a nice guy, so he helped him pack his stuff away. Haku bowed to Zabuza, who said nothing, and walked out of the room with Naruto. So, Naruto began when they were a safe distance from the geometry class and the demon dwelling therein. What's so great about that browless wonder? The quiet, long-haired boy looked surprised, and then blushed. Master Zabuza is a good person. He said no more on the matter. Naruto raised his eyebrows, but didn't push the matter. How come he throws markers at people? The blonde piped up curiously. Haku gave him a questioning look. Well, he just has a short temper. That's all. Really? Well, I've got to go to science class. See ya later. Naruto skipped leisurely down the hall. When he reached his next class, he nearly cartwheeled into the room. Neji was lounging at his desk. The little blonde boy leapt for joy and landed artlessly in the chair next to him. Neji glowered up to see who caused the disturbance, but was met with a contagious smile. Hi Neji. Naruto piped up, how are you? Neji grinned. When the bubbly girl smiled, her face disappeared. Peachy, and how are you? He asked in the most luxurious voice he could muster. Great. Naruto continued to bubble over with excitement. Neji shook his head. This girl was completely oblivious to the innuendo in his voice. Maybe she was another one of those dumb blonde types. Ooh, I can't wait to see Gaara at lunch today. We had so much fun at my uncle's house last night. Neji's face faltered. Did he just hear what he thought he heard? No, it was just his sick mind. Just your perverted mind taking over, Neji. She's too cute and innocent to do something like that. Neji's composure returned as the cute little blonde chatted his ear off. He wondered how he could stand it. He had to stand it. If he didn't, that creep, Uchiha, would take Naruto away from him in a flash. He would lose, and the Hyuga family did not lose. Kusakabe went over what they were going to discuss this year. Geology, astronomy, hydrology, oceanography, the list was endless. Naruto fell asleep once again. The teacher talked a lot. When the bell rang he sprang up from his chair like a daisy. Neji watched in shock as the blonde returned to her perky self. Gods, she was like a hamster on crack. Naruto sauntered down to the front door of Konoha with Neji in tow. There was a cafe 2 blocks down. It sold ramen. Naruto could smell it. He dragged Neji all the way to the little stand. Lo and behold, it sold ramen. Neji asked him how he knew about the place. He just pointed at his nose and beamed. Neji was impressed. Naruto could tell. They both ordered and sat on the curb, eating their ramen. Neji twirled the noodles around his chopsticks before eating them, while Naruto shoveled them into his mouth and slurped them up like a mad dog. Naruto lived for ramen. He didn't know what he'd do if he didn't have the food. He'd die, yes. He'd shrivel up and die like a leaf in January. Thank the gods for ramen. He wrote a poem called Ode to Ramen, but when he read it to Gaara he just curled into a ball and laughed until he ached. Come to think of it, he ditched Gaara. He was too absorbed with Neji. Gaara would be pissed. Don't need to worry about me. I knew you'd be here. Naruto looked up. There was the red head, reading his mind like there was nothing to it. Gaara dropped to the pavement and sat with his legs crossed. How'd you know about this place? Naruto inquired with his mouth full of noodles. Gaara rolled his eyes. I saw this place when my brother dropped me off at school this morning. Being the fanatic you were, well, you're just too predictable. Ah, Naruto shoved more noodles in his mouth. You really should be more ladylike, you know, Gaara emphasized, ladylike. Naruto stopped slurping his ramen and took careful bites of the stuff. Gaara smirked. Being manipulative was fun. We should be getting back to school now, Neji stated while dusting himself off and tossing the used styrofoam ramen cup in the trash. Right, Naruto popped up and followed Neji back to school. Gaara was left behind again. Oh well, Naruto was having fun, and Gaara knew how one-tracked his mind could be when he was having fun. He stuffed his hands in the pockets of his trench coat and strolled after him. Sasuke loafed around in his chair. Art class was such a boring class. Shikamaru was sleeping as usual with his head buried in his arms. Sasuke didn't feel the need to wake him, so he let him be. The little piece of hair that until yesterday had submitted to his will was still teasing him. It draped right over his nose. He decided to use the hair's rebellion to his advantage. He blew the piece of hair out of his face, then let it drift back when he took another breath. He blew on it repeatedly and watched as it slowly swayed away and back. It was about the 38th time he watched the wisp of hair come back to his nose when Naruto, the zombie, and the man-horse sailed into class. Out of the corner of his eye he watched Naruto plop into a chair at another table, bringing Neji down with her. He noticed Gaara rolling his eyes and saying something about the effects of gravity, magnetism, and static before he took a spot across from the lovebirds. Naruto was gazing at Neji with doe eyes. Sasuke blinked. He felt the urge to throw up. Love was disgusting. Class went by quickly, luckily. Shikamaru was inspired to wake up when Perry-sensei poked him on the head with a steel ruler. Sasuke worked on his first art project, which was whatever he wanted to draw, and Naruto took the time to profess her love to Neji in numerous ways. Sasuke would never admit it, but he was jealous. Not in a wistful way, and not in a heartache sort of way. Full-blown angry, ravenous, itchy jealousy. He hid it well though. He kept the same mask of impassiveness around Naruto as he did around every other girl. When he left class, he took one last glance at the blonde-haired girl and slunk away. Naruto traveled to gym class with his bag slung over his shoulder. Neji proposed he take a short trip to his locker. He told Naruto to head off without him. Gaara strolled beside him in his black trench coat. Naruto imagined that he was his bodyguard. The blonde boy felt famous. Gaara noticed the weird looks his friend was casting his way. What? He asked irritably after a while. Naruto smiled innocently. You look just like one of those CIA people with their long coats and dark eyes. You're scaring everyone, and it makes me feel powerful. Gaara was confused. How does me scaring people make you feel any better? Naruto shrugged. I have no idea. But it sorta feels like you're my bodyguard. Gaara cast his friend a whatever you say look and continued to walk behind him at a slow pace. When they arrived at the locker rooms, they went their separate ways. Naruto peeked into the girls' locker room. No one was there. Good. He got changed lightning fast and soon enough, girls started pouring in. He struggled not to bring memories from the depths of his uncle's office to light. Bad thoughts, Naruto. You wouldn't like to see a naked girl anyway. When Naruto entered the gym, he instantly pounced on top of Neji. He was feeling more than a little bouncy in Neji's absence. Once again, Gaara was there to explain the effects of gravity, magnetism, and static. Static and magnetism, Naruto supposed, because of the way he clung to Neji whenever he was in sight. Gravity because every time the effects of static and magnetism manifested themselves, the two of them ended up being knocked to the floor. Naruto never knew his friend was so scientific. Kakashi-sensei marched onto the gym floor with a clipboard in his hand. Alright, Naruto, you can stop groping Neji now. Naruto huffed and shook his fist at the gym teacher, who looked quite satisfied with himself, before distancing himself from Neji. Gaara heard Sasuke sigh his approval. He lifted an eyebrow at the raven-haired boy. Sasuke glowered back at him as if his authority had been challenged. Sorry to interrupt your little love stare. Leave it to Kakashi to ruin the moment. But I have a class to teach and you have a game to play. Dodgeball. And if you gaze into each other's eyes like that, you're liable to get pegged. Naruto giggled and Neji sneered. Gaara wandered leisurely over to Naruto's side, where he listened to a pointless talk about how funny his face looked. Alright, I'll split you into teams. You know the rules, right? You've played dodgeball before, right? If you haven't, then you're a pansy and you have a ferret up your ass. Now, I don't want to hear anyone snicker or make any snide comments about being hit in the face with a bunch of big balls. Yes, these things you're throwing at each other are balls. So get your minds out of the gutter and play the game. Naruto squeaked. Maybe Kakashi was on sugar high yesterday morning. He seemed a lot more serious now. We'll be playing against the other gym team in a few weeks, so get good or I'll have to shoot you. Kakashi set the field up and sorted the class into 2 teams. Naruto, Gaara, and Sasuke were all on one team, leaving Neji, Sakura and Ino on the other. They lined up on opposite walls. Gaara noticed with amusement that Sasuke and Neji were glaring so hard at each other, that he swore there were laser beams coming out of their eyes. He snickered at the thought. A whistle was heard, and the 2 teams sprang into action. Ino and Sakura sat in the back of the gym and let the rest of the team do the work for them. Neji and Sasuke were throwing things at each other like madmen. Gaara was launching the foam objects at speeds which could decapitate someone if they hit them in the head, and Naruto was scrambling about with most of the girls at the back of his side, tossing stray balls to Gaara and the rest of his team. Once in a while, Naruto would hurl a ball at a member of the opposite team. He had bad aim, but they say even a man with the worst aim can hit if he shoots enough. He whooped triumphantly when he hit the unsuspecting Sakura right in the back. The cherry-haired girl glared at him, then at Kakashi, who was too absorbed in his book to notice. Grinning wickedly, she picked up a nearby ball and aimed at Naruto. Sakura, I know how much you like balls, but put the thing down and sit out. Hit Naruto with it and I'll write you up. Sakura dropped the ball and blinked. Kakashi's nose was still buried in his precious book. She glowered and took a spot on the sidelines. I thought you told us not to make snide remarks about balls, Kakashi-sensei, she sneered. Kakashi shut his book with a snap. He was not amused. Sakura, what? Shut up. Back on the field, Naruto twiddled his thumbs. He walked over to the sidelines, for he had just been bombarded with bouncy things and was now out. Gaara was still pounding the opposite team. When they were hit, they curled up like dying bugs and made painful noises as they twitched. Soon, there were only 3 people still at it. Gaara, Sasuke, and Neji were bombarding each other with balls. Sasuke was sweating, and so was Neji. Gaara wasn't too worried about getting hit. Sasuke and Neji were too absorbed in their own game. A stray ball sailed in his direction, but Gaara had no intention of moving. He let the ball hit his chest with a thump, then he strolled off the court. Naruto's jaw was on the floor. Why did you do that? You could have lost us the game. Gaara shrugged. This fight is between Neji and Sasuke. I am of no importance in their struggle. Fight? What would they be fighting about? Naruto was in hysterics. Gaara gave him an indifferent glance. You really have no idea, do you? Naruto was genuinely confused. No idea about what? The redhead glanced at him again before shaking his head and laughing. Naruto whined, what? WHAAAT. Sasuke smirked. He was winning. He saw the sweat drip off of Neji's chin as he dodged another ball. Damn, the rat was tricky. No matter how tired he was determined to prolong his own defeat. He was putting up a good fight though, Sasuke gave him that. But it wasn't good enough. He saw the way Neji stumbled to scoop up another ball. Sasuke dodged it easily. Neji was mad. He could tell by the look on his face that he wasn't going to give up anytime soon. His pale eyes were filled with fire. Sasuke knew that if he lost, which he would, he could lose Naruto as well. Sasuke knew Neji's reasons for tolerating Naruto's behavior. Naruto was the only thing he could not let Sasuke have. The girl was the only thing Sasuke didn't have. He supposed it was the nature of men that always caused them to want what they couldn't have. But he would have Naruto. There was something he saw in her that he didn't see in the other girls. They swooned over him and obeyed his every whim like mindless drones. Yesterday, Naruto angered him. She was an annoying, disrespectful, immature, and selfish brat. He hated her, and yet he was obsessed with her. Today, he wanted to hate her so badly, but found himself unable to do so. In a flash, he was addicted to her. He would crush Neji. Naruto was a girl, so she'd naturally be drawn to the winner of this game. He smirked. Women were so predictable. The last survivor of the Uchiha family would not lose to such a low life. Sasuke always got what he wanted, and he was determined to keep it that way. Naruto looked on silently. They were killing each other. Both Sasuke and Neji looked like cats with rabies fighting over a scrap of meat. Their eyes were both wild and Sasuke had an insane grin plastered on his face. He wondered why Kakashi hadn't stopped the game. He glanced over at the teacher, expecting him to be engrossed in his book as usual. But Kakashi was engrossed in something entirely different. He was sitting calmly on the floor with his head resting on his chin. His eye was following both Sasuke and Neji as they danced across the floor. Naruto was surprised. His teacher's demeanor seemed to change with each passing moment. Perhaps the reason he was so bubbly and nice yesterday was because he wanted to make Naruto happy. And maybe to mentally scar Sasuke and Sakura for the rest of their lives. And maybe he was just bipolar or something. Something told Naruto that everything he said or did was on a whim. Kakashi didn't seem to care too much about life. Life was there and that was that. A cheer rose up from the female population and Naruto glanced about, wondering what they were all cheering for. What's going on now, Gaara? He whined. Gaara leaned back against the wall. Sasuke just beat Neji. Naruto's head snapped back to survey the scene. Sure enough, Sasuke was prancing around the gym floor while Neji was dragging himself over to the sidelines like a lame horse. Neji. Naruto raced over to his physically and mentally fatigued companion. Neji glanced at him and turned away. That bastard. How did he beat you? Neji scoffed. Because he's better than I am. Naruto was furious, but he's such a jerk and you're so nice. You're good and he's evil. He shook his fists in the air. Good is supposed to beat evil. That's the way things work. Arg. Gaara watched as Naruto stomped around on the floor, waving his fists in the air. Gaara walked over to Sasuke with an indifferent look on his face. When he had Sasuke's attention, he smirked wickedly. You'll have to try harder than that, he jeered. Sasuke raised an eyebrow and scowled. Naruto's skull is thicker than it looks. With that, Gaara strolled right back to Naruto as if the conversation never happened. Sasuke's eye twitched. His plan wasn't working. Weren't women irresistibly drawn to power? Weren't they? A minor setback, he told himself repeatedly. He would just have to work a bit harder to reach his goal. If Naruto wanted to be difficult, then let her be difficult. Sasuke's previous enthusiasm had evaporated and his arms were starting to itch. Thank God school was almost over. Great game. Sadly, though, it lasted all period. You should all thank Sasuke and Neji for taking their precious time and wasting the entire class. C's for Sasuke and Neji. And as for the rest of you, you all get B's for trying, with the exception of the ladies watching the game. They fail. Ino snarled at Kakashi. Life is not a spectator sport, ladies and gentlemen. Neither is life a game to be played by you and you alone. Life requires teamwork. You can't get through life thinking only of your own problems. And if you watch life fly by, you'll end up failing like these two losers here. Sakura gritted her teeth. Naruto could tell she was going to let go of her inner personality at any moment. She pointed a finger at Kakashi and her eyes burned. You can't fail me. My aunt is the principal of this school. You can't live by relying on the influence of people you know, Kakashi stated calmly. So, you're a philosopher all of a sudden. Sakura breathed fire at the silver-haired teacher. Kakashi crossed his arms, warning indifferently, Sakura, I keep a roll of duct tape in the top drawer of my desk. If you keep talking, you'll find out why. He smiled serenely to himself, then dismissed the class. Naruto timidly walked up to Kakashi as the gym class left. He scratched his head. Kakashi turned around and quirked an eyebrow. Naruto blushed and retreated. Never mind. Kakashi grabbed a hold of his shirt and pulled him back. Hold on. You had something to say, so get over here and say it. He let go of Naruto's shirt and he blinked up at the strange gym teacher. He tapped his fingers together. You were just a lot happier yesterday. Is this how you usually are? Kakashi considered the question. You know that Obito guy the first talked about yesterday. Naruto nodded. Sasuke's uncle, right? Yes, Kakashi seemed like he was deep in thought. Iruka told me about you when he found out you were in my class. He said you were a space cadet, a ditz, a loudmouth, and a complete nut. You sounded an awful lot like my old friend. He was an eccentric personality, and he got a kick out of it when I acted weird like him. He liked comedy, so I decided to try it on you. It did brighten up your day, didn't it? Naruto nodded, yeah it wait. He paused, how do you know Iruka? You know, Kakashi dodged the question, you should really be going now. You'll be late. How? Naruto persisted, tapping his foot on the floor impatiently. I could go for a nice sushi right about now. Stop changing the subject. Kakashi wasn't listening. Maybe you can ask Iruka, he yelled over his shoulder, when you get to his class. Sasuke fumed. He got an average grade in gym class. Sasuke was not average. He played a great game, didn't he? He beat Neji, didn't he? However hard he tried, nothing was going his way. He had an average grade in gym class, and Naruto still thought he was a jerk. Maybe Sasuke was a jerk, but he wasn't about to be Mr. Nice Guy. He was a badass, scary, rich, powerful, and hormonally challenged teen. He wouldn't let his emotions push him around. He kept telling himself this only to realize that he was once again feeling like a pile of shit. He knew it wasn't his fault. He sat in English class, scratching at his arms momentarily and feeling generally depressed. Damn heroin, he was still in school and he was already having withdrawals. Perfect. He flopped down onto his desk and sighed into his arms. Life was a bitch. A minute or so later, Naruto marched into class. Sasuke rolled his eyes. She was as chipper as a chipmunk and as squirrely as a squirrel. He felt like bashing his head on his desk, but he didn't. He didn't want to ruin his image. Naruto slipped into the desk in front of him and sketched on her arm. Sasuke peered over her shoulder. It was a fox. She was scribbling an angry-looking red fox on her arm. How droll. He watched over her shoulder for a period of time, then Iruka spoiled the moment by announcing that the class had to do a book report on the book of their choice. Sasuke grumbled. He hated book reports. Come to think of it, he hated a lot of things. When school was out, he noticed Naruto hanging around near Iruka's desk, pestering him about something. Sasuke wondered what it could be about. Whenever Naruto said something, the scar-faced teacher would turn beet red. He would eavesdrop on their conversation. He walked out of the classroom, looking like he had the intention of leaving, but stopped just outside the door. Come on, tell me, Naruto's voice squeaked. Naruto, go mind your own business. Iruka hissed. Sasuke could tell his face was redder than a tomato. You're blushing, Iruka-sensei. If you don't tell me, I'll go around the school telling everybody about the time you. Alright, I'll tell, just, don't say anything. Wow, so Naruto could be a manipulative little bitch too. All this time he thought Naruto was different from other girls. Haha, I win again. So, what's up with Kakashi and you, Iruka sighed, well, you see, we went to high school together and, Iruka paused, we see each other a lot at teachers' meetings and stuff like that. Well, he might not see me, but I see him, so. Go on, Naruto was using her sickeningly sweet voice. We talked a few times and I told him about you and how nice you were. So, well, it was fun to talk to him so I got a little carried away. I'm surprised he even listened. No one listens to me. I'm not important enough I guess. You're such a baby sometimes. Sorry, don't get yourself all worked up about it, I'm sure people listen to you. No they don't. Iruka, calm down. I do not have a crush on Kakashi. Silence. Sasuke's face screwed up. Iruka was gay. All the teachers in this goddamn school were mad. Crazy. Why on earth would a dude like another dude? Sasuke would most certainly never like another guy. Oh my god, you're in love with Kakashi. I am not. So, Iruka, how do you like Kakashi? Iruka was silent for a moment. What do you mean? Like, little puppy crush, like, or, hot, kinky sex, like. Naruto. Naruto burst into a fit of laughter. Sasuke was still dumbstruck. Why was he enrolled in a school full of crazy people? Sasuke left. He didn't need to hear any more of it. He didn't want to hear any more of it. Besides, his arms were shaking like crazy, and they felt like they were made of lead. His home wasn't very far away, but he wouldn't waste all his energy walking. He traveled to the front of the school, where he waved down a taxi. After paying the stubborn driver, who recognized him and upped his price a bit before receiving a glare, the likes of which he had never seen. Sasuke took the elevator up to the 11th floor. The elevator was relatively speedy, but Sasuke was anxious. His arms and legs felt so heavy, he thought he might have been glued where he stood. When he reached the 11th floor, he stumbled with style onto the staircase which led to his penthouse. He fumbled with his keys, but stiffened when he heard something coming from inside his apartment. He heard the distant humming of a certain man he did not want to meet at this hour. How the hell did Orochimaru get into his goddamn house? Oh yes, he had a key. Smart, Sasuke, now that's finesse. This was bad. This was worse than bad. This was falling down the stairs in front of the seniors bad. Sasuke checked to see if his sleeves were pulled over his wrists. They were. He glanced in a window to see how his reflection looked. He hissed when he noticed he was paler than usual, his hair was a mess, and his forehead was glistening with a thin film of sweat. He scrubbed his forehead with his sleeve, then straightened his hair. He fumbled with his keys again and unlocked the door. The humming stopped. Oh Jesus. Bad. Bad 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 bad. Something was going to happen. What if he found the heroin? What if he found all the porno magazines he had stashed under his mattress? What if he found his second freezer? The one with all the alcoholic beverages in it? What if, what if, what if? He wiped the sweat off of his face again and pushed the door open. Act normal. Just pretend nothing's wrong. Nothing is wrong. Good afternoon, Sasuke. You're home late. Holy Jesus. He was using the voice. The voice. The evil, sultry, seductive, silky satin voice. Sasuke never should have come home. He should have stayed at school and hung himself by the flagpole. He should have launched a spitwad at Zabuza. Then he would be in the hospital in critical condition. Anywhere but home was fine with him. What the hell are you doing in my house? Sasuke deadpanned. Don't be that way. You know you're glad to see me. Orochimaru purred. Sasuke's eye twitched. I want you to leave. If you don't leave, I will. And when I leave, I'll throw myself in front of a car. But I won't die. If I died, you'd get all my money, and that's just what you want. Orochimaru purred seductively. Why take your money when I could take you? That, Sasuke's composure was leaving him, is sexual harassment. I'm not going to take that. Get out. My house is my temple. Don't be coy. He sifted through the fridge like he'd lived there all his life. Stop it. Besides, you're old. I don't dig old people, let alone old men. Now get. I am not old. Orochimaru withdrew a can of pop from the refrigerator. You are too. You could be as old as my father for all I know. Sasuke's patience was melting like an ice cube on the pavement in August. His mask of self-control cracked and his arms shook like crazy. Orochimaru looked him up and down. You cold or something, boy? Sasuke pointed a finger accusingly at him. No, he growled, I'm not cold, I'm angry. Very, very angry. I want you to get out of my house. Now go before I call someone. Orochimaru sipped his cola. No one will believe you, boy. I made sure of it. What do you mean? The legal system in this city is easily manipulated. Bastard. Sasuke lost it. He jumped at Orochimaru and latched onto his arm with his teeth. You little brat. Orochimaru lost his balance as Sasuke tore away at his skin. Sasuke was furious. His eyes twitched, his arms itched, and his blood was boiling. Sasuke was panicking. He lost his mind when he panicked. He bit down as hard as he could until he tasted Orochimaru's hot, foul-tasting blood seeping down his arm. The older man hissed at him and flung him against the wall. The back of Sasuke's head slammed against the hard surface and he immediately released Orochimaru's arm. He fell gracelessly to the floor. He leapt to the side like an agitated wild animal when Orochimaru came closer. The man found himself being attacked again by the rabid boy. Sasuke's mind was gone, along with his strategy and tactics. All that was left was a savage viciousness. He attacked without knowing exactly what he was doing. Orochimaru took advantage of Sasuke's lack of sanity and flipped him on his back. Sasuke was pinned to the floor, snarling, scratching, snapping and kicking. His efforts to escape were futile. Orochimaru had a steely grip on both of his shoulders. Sasuke fought and fought. He tried to wriggle away, but the older man was hovering over him, keeping him in place. He felt Orochimaru straddling his hips and he panicked even more. Sasuke was trapped. No matter how hard he fought, he couldn't throw his guardian off. Suddenly, Sasuke felt a sharp pain in his neck and he went limp. Orochimaru was biting him right above his scar. And it hurt. It hurt enough to encourage a piercing cry of agony from the pinned boy. Sasuke struggled again and Orochimaru bit harder. The boy felt the older man's long tongue lapping up the blood that flowed down his neck. He started sucking at the wound and Sasuke no longer knew what to do. He lay there, stiff as a dead man. He felt like such a girl. He was letting Orochimaru do this to him. But there was no way to stop him, was there? Orochimaru sensed that his prey had given up struggling for a while, so he sucked harder. Sasuke was delirious. He was going to have a hickey. A hickey, and a bite mark to go with it. The hickey would last a week in the least, but the mark would never go away. Since when had his life taken such a bad turn? Sasuke noticed that the leech had let his guard down. He snarled and kneed Orochimaru in the groin. Orochimaru released his grip on Sasuke's shoulders and buckled in pain. "You son of a bitch." Sasuke scrambled away and locked himself in his room. Orochimaru pounded on his door twice, then left it alone. "You can't stay in there forever, you know. You'll starve and die, and then I'll get your money anyway. But then again, I don't think I want you to die yet. I want to have some fun with you first." "You've had your goddamn fun, now leave me alone," Sasuke panted tiredly. "I'll leave you alone for now, but I'll be back, boy." Sasuke heard a wicked, stifled laugh. "You're as beautiful as you are delicious, Sasuke." "Go away." Sasuke was too dazed to say something else. Without a word, Orochimaru grinned wickedly and made for the exit. Sasuke didn't dare to move until he heard the click of the door. Life was a bitch. Chibi Naruto bursts into hysterical laughter for no apparent reason. "Me? WTF? Chibi Naruto. I twitches ooh. Look at the bunny, pounces on Neji. Me? What's up with Naru-chan? Chibi Sasuke. I don't know. Me? Hang on a second, rummages those cabinets, where are those cookies? Chibi Sasuke. Actually I was going to ask you the same thing, but anyway, I almost got raped. WTF? Me? Muahahaha. I love torturing you. Chibi Sasuke. What the hell? Am I a uke or something? I thought I was the man in this story. Me? Nah, you're too hot. You're no uke. Orochimaru's just a lot stronger than you are. Hey, you might be a little OOC in that last part, but who says a perfectly sane guy can't panic once in a while and toss his right mind out the window? There's no law that says a gay guy can't rape a straight, for now guy, you know. Chibi Sasuke. Actually, there is. Me? Not in my book, okay. Chibi Sasuke. Right, Chibi Naruto. Fear me, for I am cheese. Me? He ate those cookies. Grabs hunting rifle bastard. Chibi Sakura. I think he had a bit too much candy and brand X sugary cereal with marshmallows. Chibi Sasuke. No, stop him before he ruins my house. Chibi Naruto. Yeah, pony. Giddy up, Chibi Gaara. Jesus H. Christ, what the hell is going on? Chibi Naruto. Purple cow. Purple cow. Chibi Gaara. Oh. Me? No, my underwear drawer. Get out of there, you little ga. Get that off of your head. Chibi Gaara. You have some kinky underwear, Swirl-chan. Me? You tell anyone and all. Chibi Gaara. Too late. They're already here. Points at you. Me? Oh my god. Look away, throws a bunny slipper at you. Chibi Naruto. Foams at the mouth and twitches. Me? He's got rabies. I'm gonna have to shoot him, aims rifle. Chibi Gaara. Sweet wounded Jesus. Put that gun down, woman. Me? Ha.